After all this time of doing challenge runs, we still haven't done a Nocturne run yet, so I think it is time to finally change that. And because people seem to like the Nuzlocke concept applied to SMT/Persona games, why not go for it in Nocturne as well, so here we are. Now, for those who don't know what a Nuzlocke is, this challenge run originated in the Pokemon community and includes things like only catching the first Pokemon per area, a level cap to prevent grinding, and permadeath, so that's what we're heading into, but let's look at the rules to clarify. Like just mentioned, we're only allowed to get the first demon in a new area. Since it's not always that clear when a new area starts, we'll just go with save terminals. Each time we get a new terminal, the next encounter is one where we are allowed to recruit a new demon. If negotiations fail for whatever reason, we are not allowed to recruit another demon until the next area. We play on hard difficulty for maximum torture, and since this is Nocturne, this is going to be a lot of fun. While fusions are allowed, the usage of the compendium is banned. In past runs, we still had some issues to find a good rule set for SMT games, but I think this is probably the closest we will get to it. Level cap is in place. The Demi-Fiend is not allowed to level past the next boss's level, so for example, since Matador is level 30, we're not allowed to level past 30 until we beat him. Permadeath applies. If a demon dies, we are not allowed to use it any longer. However, we're still allowed to use those demons as fusion material to fuse them into something else. Game over equals reset game. This is the rule we had in previous Nuzlockes, but let's be real. This is Nocturne. The game can literally kill you at any given point if it wants to. Because of that, we will give Demi-Fiend a total of 3 lives, meaning we're allowed to game over twice. If we game over a third time, the run is over. We are also going to collect all Magatamas in this challenge. This way we can also include all the optional side quests and get the mighty Masakado Magatama in the end as a reward, so that counts as a little extra. And of course, as always, we have the classic runs rules with no Tetrakarn, Makarakan or Miros, and no New Game Plus. I'm writing this as I go through the run, so at this point I have no idea how far we're going to be able to get, but only one way to find out. Let's head into the run. We start the game, select our difficulty, and get to name our protagonist with the glorious return of Mr. Nuzlocke. We go through the opening cutscenes, Apocalypse is upon us, and we become the Demi-Fiend. We go through the tutorial area and the first Predator double crits and wipes us. Classic Nocturne. Yeah, I'm not going to lose my first life in the tutorial area, so we just restart the entire run and go at it one more time. This is the reason why we have 3 lives. This can happen at several points in the game, so it's only fair to have some leeway at least. In our second attempt, we make it through the tutorial area, and the last battle also shows why we don't do a hardcore Nuzlocke in this challenge. Hardcore Nuzlockes also include banning items, and I am pretty sure the tutorial area is literally unbeatable without some usage of items to heal. We level up all the way to level 3 and continue on. By the way, in case you haven't noticed on the video yet, we're going for a strength build in this run. While I might put some points into vitality every now and then to increase survivability, punching things is just way too good not to use. We are also putting our first level cap on the screen. The first real boss in this game is for Neos that is coming up soon, which is level 8, so that will be our cap for now. We grab Pixie, beat the story predators with some issues, and the first encounter in the hospital grants us a Kodama. There will be another save terminal right before the boss, so with some luck we could have a full party by then. The first encounter after the save terminal contains a Shikigami that we're also able to grab. I would have preferred to a Poe here, but considering for Neos uses ice attacks, this might actually be the better option anyways. With that, we have a full party, and during grinding, Pixie evolves into High Pixie and gets to level 10, which is technically higher than the boss. In the rules we did state that the level cap only counts for Demi-Fiend, so technically this is still within the rules. Considering there won't be that many evolutions where this happens, I think we can safely continue on with this, and once we hit level 8 on Demi-Fiend, we're off into the first actual boss fight. We open up the battle with Taronda and Rakonda to debuff the enemy. For Neos mostly uses ice attacks, but luckily nobody in our party is weak against it. Both High Pixie and Shikigami can use Seo to hit weaknesses and generate press turns, while Demi-Fiend tries to hit hard with his punches. And that's pretty much all for the battle already. We continue on like this, and only a few turns later we already win the first fight with everybody still alive and well. Now, as for the level cap, the next boss is Spectre in the Amala network, and depending on how many of them are alive when they join, it can either be level 10, 15 or 20. The most common thing is to defeat 1 or 2 before they unify, which would put the boss at level 15, so this is going to be our new cap going forward. If we happen to deal enough damage to potentially beat more than 2, we will just pass until the fuse. We leave the hospital and also get to meet Raido for the first time. I chose Raido over Dante in this challenge for a very specific reason. Even though both of them have pretty much an identical moveset, Raido does make the final boss quite a bit harder. In the Chronicles version, the final boss will use the Arahan once in the fight to fully heal himself, and Root of Evil additionally comes with a Dekaja effect, and because I like Pain and Agony, obviously we go for the hardest version. The first fight on the overworld map is a Sen, which immediately starts talking to the Demi-Fiend, so we got some good luck on our recruitment here. We head into Yoyogi Park, where the first encounter is with a couple of pixies. Since our initial pixie already evolved, we would be able to recruit her, but unfortunately we get some bad luck here and Pixie just leaves once she drained a couple of MP, so no new demon here. Once we reach Shibuya, we get our next shot, but unfortunately the first encounter here consists of 2 slimes and a Preda, where neither of them can understand Demi-Fiend, so once again we have to continue on without any improvements to our lineup. I can already see that this might become a problem down the road. We meet up with our teacher and continue on with the game story. The random encounters here for the most part are not really a big issue, so unless we get some kind of unlucky back attack, I doubt we're going to have a lot of problems here. We also get access to the Cathedral of Shadows for the first time, and I am still not quite sure how to deal with this one. As explained in the rules, we are allowed to use defeated demons for further fusions, though I'm not quite certain whether to wait until we actually lose a demon or just fuse usable demons regardless of their status. I guess we will just decide on the fly depending on what we're going to do and what we're going to need as we go through the game. In the junk shop, we could also buy the first 2 Magatamas of the game, but as you can see, we got nowhere near enough Maga for both of them. Magatamas are incredibly expensive on hard difficulties, so we have to find the right time to grab certain ones without running into money issues. We meet Hichiri again and then head into the Amala network. As mentioned earlier, the boss here can have several different levels depending on how many specters are alive once they fuse. Since I am pretty sure we're not going to beat more than 2, we will have a level cap of 15, and considering this fight can go sideways quickly, we will probably try to max that level out while we're at it. The first encounter in here is a set of Will-O-Wisps and Rios, which once again, we're not able to talk to, meaning there goes the next chance to grab a new demon. We are really not having a lot of luck here in the early stages. The encounters in general are once again rather manageable. With our setup, we can hit a lot of weaknesses and generate additional press turns, which certainly makes things a lot easier and safer. Once we hit level 15 with Demi-Fiend, we are ready to head into the next boss fight. High Pixies on level 12, and both Kodama and Shikigami are on 10, which has me worried a little. Anyways, speaking of the boss fight Spectre. The battle starts out with 6 different Spectres, which all null magic, so physical is the way to go here. You have a total of 3 turns until they fuse together, so we want to try to get rid of one of them and then make sure we are ready once they get the fusion done. We start the battle by debuffing the enemy's accuracy twice, since missed attacks will cause them to lose 2 press turns. While this unfortunately does not happen, at least we have all party members still alive. Once the first one is gone, we're playing it rather defensively, healing up everybody until they fuse together. And this is where the RNG mess starts. Immediately after them fusing together, Spectre gets 2 press turns without us having any chance to debuff it. Foul Havoc is especially nasty since it is an AoE fire attack that deals quite some damage, and we got nobody with Rakukaja to buff our defense. Luckily everybody stays alive and we immediately throw out a Secunda afterwards. Unfortunately, High Pixie is not able to dodge the attack and we lose our first demon here. With our backs to the wall already, we continue debuffing the enemy's accuracy and try to heal up again, and it seems to be working since the following attack goes nowhere. At this point, Demi-Fiend and Shikigami are trying to deal damage, with Kodama healing up if necessary, and after everybody dodges the next attack, we are able to beat the enemy on the following turn. While this could have gone much worse, it still sucks to lose our High Pixie considering she was probably my strongest demon at this point. With Spectre out of the way, we are also raising our level cap again. While the upcoming mini-boss Troll is level 38, Matador afterwards is only level 30, so it's only fair we set our cap to 30. It's weird how sometimes certain bosses are already at a higher level than their follow-up. In general, I think it's probably the best to just look at the next major boss and use this one for our next cap. On the way out of the Amala network, we head into the Labyrinth of Amala for the first time. Considering we're doing the true demon ending, we're going through all 5 Kalpas in here eventually. Since those aren't tied to the game's story though, we will not necessarily do them as soon as they become available. You can't recruit demons in here anyways, so there is no real incentive to do them as soon as possible, other than grabbing Death Stones for Fiend Fusion if needed. Next up is the area of Ginza, where we finally get a shot to recruit a new demon again. Before that though, we return to Shibuya to buy the 2 Magatamas from the junk shop. Iomante especially is important, since it holds all debuff spells for the Demi-Fiend. In the Cathedral of Shadows, we also unlock the Sacrificial Fusion. Generally, this would be a pretty nice add-on, but we are already lacking demons as we go through the game, so I'm not really sure how often we're going to use that. Anyways, our first encounter in Ginza is a set of 3 Jack Frost and a Huapo. Once the Huapo is down, we try to recruit good old Jack Frost and get lucky enough that he actually joins us. Hooray for our He-Who buddy, and about time we get some new additions to the party. We also head to the jewelry for the first time, and here's another thing we need to talk about. As most of you know, you can trade gems for elements and mitamas here. I wasn't quite sure how to incorporate those into a rule set at first, but in the end I decided to treat them as free demons. We're allowed to grab each of them one time only. If they get beaten or are used in a fusion, we're not allowed to get another one. For now, we would only be able to grab Aquans anyways, so we just continue on without buying any of them now. We meet Madame Nyx, talk to Loki, and then continue on with the story. Since we also head into a new section of the overworld, we are allowed to grab the first demon in here, which happens to be an angel. After not having a lot of luck the past few areas, we're starting to increase our stock, which gives me some kind of relief. We head into the Harumi warehouse next, seeing as we can grab another demon here. Unfortunately, the first encounter here not only is a Koranson, which we can recruit anyways, they also ambush us and wipe Sen, so there goes the next demon. Luckily they're weak to light attacks, so we can take them out with Hama, but this was not what I was hoping for coming in here. We return to Ginza and head into the Cathedral of Shadows. Since both High Pixie and Sen are out, might as well fuse them together, and we even get something useful out of it with his Sora. Luckily Sen already learned Warcry earlier, which is a 2-stage physical and magic attack debuff, which is definitely the most important skill to carry over. With this new setup, we head back into the warehouse and the Great Underpass of Ginza, which gives us another opportunity at a new demon. Our first encounter here is a set of 2 Sudamas and 3 Slimes. Since we can talk to the Slimes, we get them out of the way and then successfully recruit the Sudama. Unfortunately, only a bit later this happens. We not only run into an encounter with 4 Sudamas and 3 Kodamas, they all raise their magic with Makaja, and since we severely lack AoE options at the moment, we're not able to get rid of all of them on the following turn, and the party-wide Masan gives us our first game over of this game. This is Nocturne at its full beauty. I was very much aware that our first game over would probably come at the hands of a random encounter instead of an actual boss fight. I was just hoping it wouldn't be this early. And considering the amount of possible encounters holding several Sudamas in the underpass, I really wasn't sure how to progress further without risking another game over. The party can take a single Masan, but a second or third one are guaranteed wipes. Since I haven't had the chance to save yet, our Sudama from before is gone now too, but the chance of another one appearing on the first encounter is rather high, so this shouldn't matter too much. Anyways, what is the best way to progress from here on? With our current level, we could theoretically fuse an Usuchi which drains force. This would not only help getting through the underpass since a drain eats all the remaining press turns, it would also be very useful against Matador later on, so check the fusion calculator if there is any way we could fuse one, and lo and behold, there is a possibility. though it involves sacrificing 3 demons in the process. We fuse Kodama and Jack Frost into Apsaris, and then fuse that one with Angel into Nozuchi. We carry over Dia, so we still have access to heals, as well as Dark Might, which comes in handy against boss fights especially. While we do have somebody with Drain Force now, we also reduced our demon stock to a total of 4, including Demi-Fiend, so if anybody goes down, we got a major problem. With that, we return to the underpass to hopefully get through without any more issues now. Just like before, our first encounter once again is a set of 2 Sudamas, and we're able to recruit it one more time. And the following encounter proves why getting Nozuchi was definitely the right call. We run into a set of 4 Sudamas and 2 Slimes, and thanks to Nozuchi draining force damage, this immediately ends their turn and we can beat the enemies soon after. Without Nozuchi, I am pretty sure this would have been another wipe, so I am confident we made the right decision to fuse it. Once we reach the mannequin portion, we could also buy the next 2 Magatamas in the junk shop, but just like before, they are super expensive. Still, we want to try to get at least a Hifumi one early since it nulls force, which is going to be very important. Not only that, but it also carries Warcry, which is a great debuff spell to have available. Kamudo is important too, especially for the focus skill, but for now we don't have nearly the amount of Maka needed to get either of them anyways. Unfortunately, we're also not able to grab a new demon here, since the only spawn in the village are Isoras in the water, which we already have in our party. Nonetheless, they are great to grind on since they're relatively easy to beat and give decent amounts of experience and money as well. Since we also got a couple of gems in the meantime, we get an arrows from the gem shop to get our demon stock up again, and then talk to the collector mannequin to unlock the next portion of the story. The troll fight can be quite dangerous, but luckily it is weak to literally every status element in the game. We use Arrow's Lullaby to put it to sleep, and Warcry as well as Tarunda to make sure we can take its attacks. Lullaby also helps increasing the rate of critical hits on the enemy. With 4 stages of attack debuffs, its attack is really not any dangerous any longer, and with the help of poison, we can continue on until the enemy is down. At this point, we could theoretically head into the first Fiend fight, but I really don't feel very comfortable at our current level. We're not going to grind all the way up to 30, but a few more levels certainly won't hurt, especially since we got a few useful skills coming up soon. Eventually, we got enough money to grab both Magatamas from the junk shop, and we also get another element with Aquans from the gem shop. Elements can fuse into all kinds of useful stuff later on, so might as well grab them now while we can also use them in battle. Speaking of which, we use our arrows to fuse it with Isora and get a Kappa Tengu. This is another demon that nulls force and also learns quite a couple of useful skills, including several evolutions down the line. With Nozuchi, Aquans and the newly acquired Kappa Tengu, I am fairly confident we got a solid lineup for now, so once we hit level 22, we're good to go continue with the game. Why 22? Well, it was the earliest level we could have gotten Fog Breath on Demi-Fiend in our current setup. With that, it is now time for probably the most infamous boss of the entire game, the battle against the first Fiend Matador. Matador starts the battle by maxing his hit rate and evasion, and then starts attacking. Luckily, 3 of our 4 demons null or drain force, while Aquans resists all magic attacks. We use Fog Breath to lower the enemy's evasion, and then start buffing our own evasion and also defense. Once our defense buffs are up, we also raise our attack with Tarukaja, and then start going to work on the enemy. Matador can use the Kunta to dispel his debuffs, but once our party is fully buffed, this shouldn't be such an issue any longer. Once we push Matador into phase 2, we will start using Andalusia, but with full buffs, this is not a big deal. Taunt does lower the party's defense by 2 stages though, so ideally we want to end the battle quickly now. Luckily, the following turn is already enough to secure us the victory, and we beat the first Fiend of the game with all party members still alive and well. With that, we also raise our level cap once again to level 35, which is the level of the upcoming Thor fight in the Mantra headquarters. The underpass is probably one of my least favorite areas in the game. A lot of encounters can be rather nasty, so we try to get through there as quickly as somewhat possible. On a more positive note, during all of this, Nozuchi evolved and took Xuanwu shortly after. This was also the reason why I didn't want to hold off on Matador for too long, since Xuanwu, unlike Nozuchi, doesn't drain force attacks, so I wanted to get that battle done before it evolves. Though we did run into dangerous situations occasionally, we managed to make it all the way to Ginza without losing any more demons. We unlocked the Compendium, which we're not allowed to use anyways, and also have another chance at a new demon now. The first encounter is a set of 2 Inugamis. Those are actually good since they have somewhat decent skills, and later on evolve into Makami, and while we screwed up the first conversation, the second one luckily worked and we got it to join the party. In the Cathedral of Shadows, we also fuse our Shikigami and Sudama into a Jack-o'-lantern, since we're not using either of them, and Jack-o'-lantern might be useful occasionally. Once we reach level 25 with Demi-Fiend, we also get access to Warcry. While I am not planning on making him a support character, having those strong debuff options available early on certainly makes things quite a bit safer. At level 27, I decided that now might be a good time to continue on, so we head into the Mantra headquarters, watch Isamu get wrecked, and then have to fight our way out of prison. The first fight is against an Orpheus, so we equip the Shiranui Magatama for Null Fire and head into battle. The battle is straightforward for the most part. Buff and debuff a little, and then start going to work. Suanwu having access to Bufula certainly helps with damage and press turns. Orpheus starts using Agilao in phase 2 of the battle, but with buffs up, this is not a big issue, and it's already down on the following turn. Same goes for the Yaxenium battle number 2. We equip the Hifumi Magatama and repeat the same steps just like with Orpheus before, and the battle is not a big issue either. Unfortunately, we weren't able to hit a shock proc with Seo, but even without that, the battle is already over after a couple of turns. The biggest issue certainly is the final battle against Thor. We don't have any Magatama which nulls electricity yet until after the battle, and we also got no demons that null electricity either, so we have to go full buff and debuff and hope we can get through that way. We equip the Kamudu Magatama since it gives you resist physical, and Thor also likes to use physical attacks. Replace Suanwu who's weak to electricity with Aquans, and then head into the final battle. We open up throwing out all debuffs at him, while also buffing our evasion with Tsukokasha. This seems to work pretty well since he misses at least one attack most of the time. A focused crit attack does over 800 damage, and the party continues to dodge attacks left and right, and eventually we beat the enemy without losing a single demon yet again. We get the Narukami Magatama as reward, and continue on with the game's story. Our level cap once again gets raised to level 40, but before we are able to head up the Mantra HQ, we get interrupted by Raido and have to battle him next. Since Raido has access to the Kunda, we mostly focus on buffing our party's defense and evasion. With 4 stages of buffs up, he still hits hard, but we shouldn't be in danger of losing any party members, so we start doing damage once we're all set up. A focused punch again does over 800 damage, so this should be over rather quickly. Once he transitions into phase 2, he will start using Provoke, which also heals him for 750 HP, so you want to end the battle as soon as possible once he starts with that. Another focused punch is already enough, and we win yet another battle without losing a demon. Not only that, but Suanwu also learns a Stoma on level 26, so we can also reduce the amount of low level random encounters going forward, which is a nice quality of life update, especially when it comes to getting the best possible demon recruitment in a new area. Speaking of which, the first encounter in the Mantra HQ is a set of 3 Nekomata, and once the first 2 are gone, we are able to recruit the last one into our party. Considering we only had a total of 4 party members for a while, we're getting a good amount of demon stock now with only 1 more open slot available. At level 17, Inugami also finally evolves to Makami. We talk to Isamu in the prison, and since we heavily focused our build on strength so far, we are already strong enough to open the door and grab the Gaea Magatama. Considering we can't learn its first skill until level 61, it's not that useful as of now, but the plus 10 in strength and vitality might come in handy at certain times. Copper Tengu also reaches level 24 at this point and evolves into Karazu Tengu. This is one of the reasons why I decided to fuse it earlier. It can evolve twice and become pretty strong later on. On top of the HQ, we technically enter a new area as well, so we're able to grab a Bat Katha and meet Gosu Tenno, who grants us additional 2 demon slots. We could also try our hand at the next Fiend Daisuchu now, but considering we can't fuse it until level 37, we will hold off on that for a while. Even more so since it can easily wipe party members on our current level, so we headed to the assembly of Nihilo next. The first encounter here is a forced one against an Incubus and a Kappa Tango, so this technically does not count as our encounter for the area. The first real random encounter consists of 2 Kappa Tangos and the Forneos. While we already got the Kappa Tango, we could grab the Forneos, but unfortunately the recruitment doesn't go so well and it just runs off. With that, we head into the first fight against Eligor, who starts the battle summoning to this. Eligor itself is weak against electricity, so we use that to our advantage to generate additional press turns. We use 1 Fog Breath to reduce Eligor's accuracy as well, and then start going to work. It's only a couple of turns until it's down, and we continue on. No big issues here. Same thing pretty much in the second Eligor fight. Nothing to mention here for the most part. This time, we also managed to get a lucky shock proc, which makes the battle even easier, and we're done soon after. The next battle is against Barif, who starts the battle with 2 Succubus. Again, we use Fog Breath to reduce the accuracy, and then start going to work. Barif is weak to ice attacks, so we use Bufula from Xu Wu for some extra damage. The Succubus can put sleep onto the party with Lullaby, but for the most part this is not really dangerous, and a few turns later we're done with this battle as well. The last mini-boss in here is against a set of 3 Kaiwan, and here we wanna be extra careful since they love to spam insta-kill attacks. Because of this, we throw out Tetraja Rock with Demi-Fiend to make sure no insta-wipes happen. Other than that, it's just as before. Buff and debuff, go to work, and eventually win the battle. We received the last Keela, meet up with Akawa again, and are now ready to head into the actual boss battle of this dungeon against Ose. Ose exclusively uses physical attacks and also likes to use focus, so as always, we start the battle putting up buffs and debuffs. Technically, Ose has access to both the Kaja and the Kunda, though he rarely ever seems to use those. With buffs and debuffs up, the incoming damage even with focus is not really worth mentioning at all, so we start going to work with our focused attacks from Demi-Fiend and everybody else. He can also use both Wakara-Karn or Tetra-Karn, but in this battle he never went for those. And yeah, that is pretty much everything there is about this fight. Continue on like this and eventually win. As reward, we get the Anathema Magatama and continue on. Our level cap stays at 44 now though, since the upcoming boss only has a level 34. In the Mantra HQ, we meet Chiaki again, Gosu Tenno dies, but before we head into the prison to meet up with Isamu again, there is something else we still need to do. Since we have gained a couple of levels in the assembly of Nihilo, I thought now might be also a good time to head into the next Fiend fight against Isucho that we haven't done earlier. We are still a few levels off being able to fuse him, but since we're already here, might as well do the fight now. The fight against Isucho is split into 3 phases, where in our scenario, phase 2 is probably the most dangerous one since he likes to spam insta-kill attacks during it, and we used up all our Tetraja Rocks against the Kaiwan earlier. Phase 1 can be rather nasty too though, since meditation drains the majority of a demon's MP. I also am not a fan of him almost wiping Xu Wu on turn 1. Still, we start the battle as always, putting on buffs and debuffs. Daisuchu has neither the Kaja nor the Kunda, which definitely helps. Once we are ready to go, we focus with Demi-Fiend and start putting out the damage. The incoming damage is not a problem, but the MP drain does suck for sure, which is why we want to end the battle quickly. Mahamon luckily doesn't wipe anybody, and the following turn is already enough to push him into the last phase, where he starts using Preach. Luckily Makami is immune to Mind, and Demi-Fiend doesn't get inflicted with any ailments on the following 2 turns. Karasu Tengu throws away some money thanks to the confusion, but luckily we have done enough damage to beat Daisucho with the following focused attacks. With this, we could now fuse it once we get to level 37, but we still need to grab a Death Stone in order to do so, so we also headed to the first Kalpa now. Like mentioned earlier, we don't really have any hurry completing the Kalpa super early on, and with a higher average level, they become much more bearable thanks to his Stoma eliminating the majority of random encounters. Once we got everything we need, we have the cutscene with Metatron, and then head back for now since we can't access the second Kalpa yet anyways. We meet up with Isamu again, and then are ready to head into the next dungeon of the game. Before that though, we get interrupted on the highway as the third Fiend Hellbiker is stopping us from advancing. Hellbiker starts off the battle using Hell Exhaust, which is an AoE force attack that also comes with a secondary Dekaja effect. Luckily, he can't dispel his own debuffs, so we start going to work using Fog Breath and Warcry again. Once we are finished setting up, we are back to focus and punching. The incoming damage, if he manages to hit party members, is really not a problem with debuffs up, so we can continue on until we win the battle. Nothing special to mention about his phases here, since the majority of attacks really are not any dangerous. At this point, I also started noticing that it's been quite a while since we last lost a demon in general. We made it through the past few segments with little issues, which is nice, especially after that rather rough start early on. Anyways, with that we head into Kabukicho prison next, and we get another chance to recruit a new demon to the party. Our first encounter here consists of 3 Nagas, and while they got dangerously close to wipe Xun-Woo and Makami, we pulled through and are able to recruit the last one. Kabukicho prison in general is a more complicated dungeon, and I remember getting confused here for quite a bit in my casual playthrough. Luckily, I didn't remember anything from back then, so I struggled once again until I finally figured out which way to go. Other than that, there isn't much to mention here. We make it all the way to the boss and are up against Misuchi next. While I did remember to put on a Magatama for an all ice, I completely forgot that Misuchi always opens up the battle with Mirage, and as you can see, this can quickly become an issue with 3 out of 4 party members getting confused. Luckily, we're able to get off a double Fog Breath to start with. After resummoning Karasa Tengu, who decided to return to the stock the previous turn, we're now finally starting to fully debuff the boss and get some bits of damage in. The boss being weak to fire certainly helps, since we once again can generate additional press turns with Fire Breath on Makami. Unfortunately, Misuchi also has access to the Kunda, so we have to reapply buffs somewhat regularly. And here's another thing I kinda forgot. Not only does Misuchi use Mirage when opening the battle, it also uses it every time it transitions into the next phase, so once again we have to deal with confusion, and this time we didn't get so lucky and it resulted in Karasa Tengu being wiped due to us having no chance to heal up before the next attack. At this point I started to panic a little. This is supposedly one of the easier bosses, and we already lost a demon here and might even look into losing the next life here. Luckily, both Demi-Fiend and Xun-Woo null ice, so as long as we can keep Makami alive, we should be good, hopefully. The last Mirage gets Demi-Fiend dangerously close on HP, but luckily the boss attacks Xun-Woo the following turn, and the counter is enough to win the battle. Now this was way more dangerous than I anticipated going in, and we are kinda lucky we got through here without another game over, though we did lose Karasa Tengu unfortunately. In hindsight, it probably would have been better to equip the Yomati Magatama to prevent the confusion, but it's too late for that now, gotta make the best of it going forward. As a replacement for Karasa Tengu, we go with the Naga that we just recruited earlier. A lot of our bench demons have fallen behind on levels, so Naga is probably the best replacement we can use until we get to fuse Daisuchu at level 37. At this point, we're only 2 levels off anyways, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. Speaking of levels, with defeating Misuchi, we also raise our level cap to 50, so we have quite some leeway on levels now again. We meet up with Isamu yet again and continue on. We make a quick detour to the Cathedral of Shadows because I wanted to see what I could do with Karasa Tengu, now that we can use it any longer, and would you look at that. Karasa Tengu and the newly acquired Naga fuse into Daisuchu. While I'm not happy that we lost Karasa Tengu, this is pretty much the ideal scenario since we would have fused it anyways, even if it wouldn't have gone down in the boss fight. Convenient luck if I may say so. We talk to Hichiri again, and then head into Ikebukuro Tunnel, which is another new area, so you know what that means. Our first encounter here is none other than the almighty Mothman, but unfortunately we can't recruit it, so no new demons for now. The one random encounter I want to point out here is any setup consisting Saru Tahiko. Not only can it use counter to deal some good damage if you attack it with physical attacks, it also has access to focus, and I really want to prevent that from happening, so it's usually our #1 priority to take out during random encounters. There are also the optional encounters against the 4 Onis in here. Beating all 4 would give us the Murakumo Magatama, but since this is not really that useful, we will skip those battles for now and come back later at a higher level. Before leaving the area, we have to go through part 2 of the underground station, and this is technically a new area, so we are allowed to grab a new demon here. The first encounter is a set of a Kelpie, a Black Goose and a Sarotahiko. And to be honest, I didn't even think about recruiting here at first, but once Kelpie and Black Goose were gone, Sarotahiko approached the party and joined voluntarily, so I guess we can take that. In Asakusa, we could also buy the next 2 Magatamas in the junk shop, but as always, they are way too expensive for now. The Gehenna one is not that important, but we want to make sure to grab the Nirvana Magatama as soon as possible since it carries the Vine Shot that Demi-Fiend can learn from level 42 on forward. The Vine Shot is probably the strongest physical skill we can get until late game skills like Spiral Viper or Freikugel. We are also starting to fuse a few things since our stock is getting filled up and we have a lot of low level demons that we're probably never really gonna use anyways. We fuse our Jack-O-Lantern with Nekomato to get a Principality. Principality can fuse into Hellbiker later on, so that is definitely something to keep in mind as well. Since we're already in Asakusa, might as well get Puzzle Boy out of the way now. The gayest Magatama we get as a reward is not necessarily needed, but it does come with Tetraya that could be useful down the line. We also finally reached level 37 with Demi-Fiend, so it is time to fuse Daisojo now. Daisojo might just be the best healer in the entire game. Though he doesn't learn Prey until level 39, with it, he can heal the entire party to full and also clear all status ailments. The 50 MP cost is easily offset thanks to meditation, which can drain 100 plus MP from an enemy. This is the one demon I need to protect the most, since losing Daisojo would probably be the biggest blow to our setup. And to test it out, we head back into Ikebukuro Tunnel and fight the first Oni Fuki. I am not planning on fighting them all right now, but this one is basically right next to the entrance, so might as well go through this fight now. Again, we open up debuffing the enemy and buffing the party. Fuki likes to use Beast Eye and later on Dragon Eye and buff its magic with Makaya and then follow up with Masan, but with buffs and debuffs up, this is not a huge issue and a couple of turns later, the battle is already over again. Back in Asakusa, we run into Sakahagi for the first time and meet Futomimi and Mifunashiro again. This is where Daisojo starts to shine even more. A lot of enemy formations here and also later on in the obelisk are weak to insta-kill attacks, and with Daisojo having access to both Mahamaon and Mamudon, we can beat a lot of enemies before they even get the chance to do anything. Speaking of the obelisk, this is going to be our next destination, but before that, we fuse a little something again. Since I'm not quite satisfied with Sarotahiko as party member, we fuse our Principality from before and fuse it with Bat Katha to get a Silk. Silk has good elemental coverage and is only a level below Demi-Fiend, so this looks like a good upgrade for the moment. On the way to the obelisk, we have to go through the second part of the Nihilo assembly, so we get another chance at a new demon. The first encounter here is a set of 3 Succubus, where we are luckily successful in recruiting, so we are off to a good start again. Other than that, there is nothing special here. Grab a couple of chests and cross the corridors until you reach the other end. Next up is the obelisk. The first encounter in here is a set of Karasu Tengu, Baphomet and Eligor. Since we can't talk to Baphomet, we get rid of it and Karasu Tengu and then successfully recruit Eligor. We meet the Moire sisters for the first time and continue climbing the tower. Like mentioned before, Daisojo is definitely the MVP in here. There are so many demons weak to light attacks and we can often eliminate entire encounters before they even get a chance to do anything. The puzzles with the moon phases are luckily no issue either, since my math brain still is somewhat intact. Generally the obelisk is a rather long dungeon, but luckily there is also a healing spot in the later parts of it which was very much needed at that point already. Once we hit level 43, we also finally get to learn the Vine Shot on Demi-Fiend, and this will make things quite a bit more comfortable, considering we have been literally punching our way through bosses with the regular attack until now. With that, we are up against the Moire sisters now, starting with Clotho. Clotho mostly uses ailments to screw with the party, but luckily both Demi-Fiend and Daisojo null those. As always, we buff and debuff and then go to work with our newly acquired Divine Shot skill. Since we need to beat all 3 of them in a row pretty much, We're also skipping out on focus in order to save some MP for debuffs on the upcoming fights. Still, the battle is not a big issue. The Mahama towards the end had me sweating for a moment, but luckily nobody went down and we finished the fight on the following turn. Up next is Lachesis. Her main gimmick is buffing and debuffing, as well as using Tetrakarn and Makarakarn. We can easily outbuff her though, and if she decides to use Tetrakarn, we just continue buffing the following turn before going back to damage. Generally, not a very special fight, and we're done a couple of turns later. The last sister is Atropos, and while her sister's mechanics mostly revolve around some kind of shenanigans, she comes in with straight up damage, doing either ice, force or fire damage. Just like in every other fight, we start the battle off by buffing and debuffing, and then go to work. Even though Zook is weak to ice, it's not a big deal since Suanwu drains it, therefore immediately ending Atropos' turn if she uses it. If the party takes bigger damage, we can easily heal it up with prayer and continue on until we win the fight just a few attacks later as well. After fighting all three back to back, we now have to battle them at the same time. Unsurprisingly, we once again start the battle off by buffing the party and debuffing the enemies and then go to work. We want to take out Clawful first since she can use Meteorama to heal up the others. Luckily Atropos is the last one to attack, so if we can null anything from either Clawful or Lachesis, she won't even get a turn in. But even if they all get a chance to attack though, with buffs and debuffs up, the damage really is no big issue at all. Once we got rid of Clawful, we focus on Atropos until she's down a couple of turns later as well. With only Lachesis remaining, this battle is practically won, and it's just a few more attacks until we complete the battle and get the Chad Magatama as a reward. With that, we also raise our level cap again to the nicest possible level and continue on with the game after freeing our teacher from the fangs of Yorikawa. We get another cutscene with the old woman and let Chichiri transfer us back into the Amala network to get a hold of Isamu. We literally don't get a single random encounter here with Estoma up. My guess is that there are still the same demons as on our first visit, and even if they were stronger, them not showing up thanks to Estoma probably means that their level is low enough for them not to be very useful anyways. Because of this, we just make our way through the entire network until we run into our good old buddy Spectre again. This time they're not going to fuse, but they got a new gimmick. They can use Megiddo now, but in order to do that, they need to drain MP off the party first. While this is rather annoying, the strategy still remains the same. Buff and debuff, and then go to work. Since they all null magic attacks, which I promptly forgot in the beginning, Demi-Fiend has to do most of the work while the rest of the party plays support. While we can't prevent all of them from using Megiddo, we can drain their MP with Daisuju as well, so this counts as some kind of damage mitigation if you will. Megiddo does roughly 100 AoE damage, so it's not really fatal or anything, but getting a few of those thrown at you can easily cause trouble, so we still want to play this carefully. They can also cast Kunda, which is annoying, but we can always reapply debuffs if needed. Zook barely survived the turn with 7 HP, but luckily we were able to take out the first one shortly afterwards, which makes the fight significantly easier. After that, it's just clearing up the last couple of them and win the battle. Before we are continuing on with the main story, we are back into the labyrinth of Amala to go through the second Kalpa, mostly to grab the Death Stones. Just like before, we're at a point where Estoma prevents a lot of random encounters thanks to our higher level. And in case anybody is curious, no, we're not going to go through the cursed corridor here. While the 250,000 Maka would be really nice, we have no way to prevent the cursed tile damage, and a single Abaddon encounter is probably enough to wipe the entire party, and that is a risk I really don't want to take. Anyways, we grab the Moon Key and Death Stones and then head back again. With our current setup, we shouldn't have a lot of issues taking out the remaining Onis, so we head back into Ikebukuro Tunnel to clear out the remaining 3, starting with Kinki. You probably already know the drill at this point. Buff and debuff, and then start going to work. Kinki resists physical attacks, so Demi-Fiend plays the role of support this time around. Kinki likes to focus on physical attacks while also throwing out a Rakunda or Rakukaja every now and then. Otherwise, the fight is rather simple. We get a lucky freeze, which means physical attacks do full damage on that turn, and that is already enough to win the fight. Up next is Suiki, who is weak to fire, so this already puts us at advantage with Suk having access to Fire Breath. Suiki likes to attack with both physical attacks and Ice Breath, which is not a big problem. During later parts of the battle, it does gain access to both Health Thrust and Glacial Blast though, so you want to make sure to have buffs and debuffs up to prevent anybody from going down. In our case, this wasn't even a problem though, since the combination of Fire Breath and a crit focused Divine Shot were enough to completely skip the last phase and immediately win the battle. With that, the only one remaining is Ongyoki, and this battle is pretty much free if you know the mechanics behind it. I remember vividly trying to punch my way through this boss targeting at random in my casual playthrough because I had no idea what the mechanics here revolve around. If you battle Ongyoki during full Kagatsuchi, you can tell the real one by its shadow, and then the only thing you need to do is to attack it once to make the copies disappear. This will make him summon new ones and buff himself, and then you can pretty much rinse and repeat that process until it's down. We make sure to debuff the boss every once in a while to counteract his buffs, but other than that, this battle is pretty much free, and after a while we beat the last Oni and get our Murakumo Magatama as a reward. And while we are already at clearing optional stuff, we also fully complete the second Kelpa now to unlock the next set of feats. The first one immediately starts bothering us once we're out of the labyrinth, so let's head into the battle against White Rider. White Rider starts the battle by summoning 2 Virtues, which is something we can use to our advantage since those are weak to force damage, so we can generate press turns with both Suk and Daisuchu while also debuffing White Rider in the process. We're not really gonna focus on the Virtues too much since they just get resummoned, but the extra press turns certainly come in handy. White Rider's most dangerous attack is definitely Prominence, especially if it hits a single party member twice, which Daisuchu almost went down to. Thanks to the Virtues regularly casting Rakunda, we also have to make sure our defense is up by recasting Rakukasha occasionally. Another Prominence almost wipes Xuanwu, so we're definitely in very dangerous territory right now. After critting Demi-Fiend with his regular attack, we only survived due to a dodge, but luckily at this point we got the enemy down enough where a few more attacks are enough to take it out and win the battle. Not going to lie, this was incredibly close, and without good luck, this could have easily been another game over. And because this wasn't dangerous enough already, we will go after the next fiend right after. Before we do that though, we quickly stop in the Cathedral of Shadows to fuse Hellbiker using our Suk and the Succubus from earlier. While it probably is one of the weaker fiends to use, it still can be pretty useful overall, and it's still got great elemental affinities. With that being said, we continue on towards Red Rider, though this one might be even trickier considering it has access to Dekunda, and my party is set up much better for debuffs than for buffs, but let's see for ourselves. Red Rider starts the battle by summoning 2 powers. Similar to last time, those are mostly here to buff their attack, but unlike in the White Rider battle, we unfortunately can't use any weaknesses to our advantage here. Again, we start the battle by buffing and debuffing, though we try to focus more on the debuffing part. Terrorblade hits like a truck, and the power will occasionally try to insta-wipe party members with Hammer on. Luckily, the majority of our setup at this point is immune to insta-kill attacks. Warcry makes sure to negate the double Torukasha from power, and Divine Shot once again does most of the damage. As long as nobody gets one-shot, the damage is manageable since we can easily heal up to full thanks to prayer. Unfortunately, an unlucky Windcutter on Xuanwu followed by another Terrorblade is enough to take it out. The Divine Shot on the following turn though is luckily enough to take out Red Rider, and we get rid of the powers on the turn after. Xuanwu served us well for a big portion of the game, but I guess it's time to shift around our party setup a little again. Due to its base level being rather low as well, there isn't really anything useful we could fuse it into, so eventually I decided to use it as fodder during Sacrificial Fusion, where we fused Makami and Saratsuhiko into Komokuten and used Xuanwu to boost its level to 48. And since we're already dealing with the Horseman, might as well continue with number 3 against Black Rider. Just like his buddies, he starts the battle by summoning 2 Legion. Unlike Red Rider, he has no access to Dekunda though, so we can take full advantage of using all debuffs again. The Legions like to use Makaya to buff everybody's magic, but Warcry easily takes care of it, and once we are finished setting up, We go to work as always using Focus and Divine Shot. Black Rider's go-to attack is Soul Divide, which can cause several ailments, but since 3 of our 4 party members null it, this is not a problem at all. He can also use Megidolaon, but with debuffs up, the damage is easily manageable and healed up with prayer. And that is pretty much all there is to that battle. A couple of Divine Shots later, Black Rider is down and the legions follow soon after. We meet up with Ikawa again, listen to Futomimi's speech, and then are off to battle the last horseman as we head into the battle against Pale Rider. Again, this one has no access to the Kunda, so we can take full advantage of debuffs yet again. Unfortunately, the summoned Loas can cast Debilitate, so we wanna try not to waste too much time and start attacking once we set up everything. Pestilence insta-wipes everybody inflicted with poison, but luckily we're set up well against ailments, so this is not a big issue either. Once Pale Rider gets low on HP, the Loas start using Last Resort, which not only heals the boss but also does major damage against the party. Luckily, Loa number 2 only went for Stone Gaze, so everybody was able to take the hit, and another Divine Shot is enough to take it out. One more hit to Loa is enough, and we win the last battle against the Horseman. The Last Resort was unexpectedly nasty, but other than that, the riders, with the exception of Red Rider, were much more manageable than I at first anticipated. We also got access to the Collector Mannequin shop now, which has 2 more Magatamas with Vimana and Sophia. As expected, those are ridiculously expensive, but ideally we want to grab at least a V-Mana one early since it has Endure on it, which, especially in a challenge setup like this, could make or break the run. Since we have done a lot of optional content, it is now time to get back to the main story and head to Yoyogi Park next. Before we reach that though, we have to go through another Asakusa tunnel, which technically counts as a new area as well. The first encounter in here is a set of 2 Yomotsu Ikusa which open up with Mudon against Isojo, which promptly gets reflected and insta-wipes itself. We successfully recruit the second one and then continue on. Since there is nothing special here other than a couple of items, we skip forward to the next area of the game, Yoyogi Park, where we talk to Yuko before heading deeper into the park. Our first encounter in here is an Oberon, which we are once again successful in recruiting. I would have liked to get a Titania here, but considering we're only level 51, we wouldn't be able to recruit her, so I guess Oberon is probably the best option here anyways. Oberon and Eligor would also fuse into White Rider, so we could get another Fiend here once we hit level 52. Yoyogi Park's mechanics with the Pixies is rather simple if you actually pay attention to them. If you're playing on autopilot like I do at times, it can get rather annoying quickly though. We grind up until level 54 since there is another demon I want to fuse here, which is Shikiuchi, that we can get with Yomotsu Ikusa and Earthis. It has great magic, which we're going to need for the next boss fight, and the null physical comes in handy as well, considering the next boss mostly uses physical attacks and we can quickly end its turns this way. With that, we're now ready to battle the next boss, my personal favorite challenge run demon, Girimekala. As most of you may know by now, Girimekala repels all physical attacks, so we need to head into this one with a magic setup. As always, we start the battle by buffing and debuffing, and then go to work once we're done. Girimekala does have access to the Kunda, which makes things a little more annoying, but not really all that dangerous. Like mentioned before, Giri mostly attacks with physical attacks or Toxic Cloud, neither of which really do much damage to the party. Once we are fully buffed, White Rider's Prominence does around 420 damage per hit and can hit up to 2 times, so we should be good on damage now as well. And yeah, there is not that much to say about this fight otherwise. Once Giri is down, Sakahagi spawns right afterwards, but since our buffs are preserved from the previous battle, it's only a couple of attacks until he is down as well. We receive the Yahiro no Homogi and continue on. Our level cap gets increased once again, though this time only by 1 to level 70. We are far under the cap right now, so there really isn't any need to worry at all. We might do a little grind soonish though, just to increase our survivability. Since we also unlock the next Fiend fight now, which ironically also has to be done with a magic party, we might as well head into this one next, as we battle Mother Harlot. Mother Harlot starts the battle by attacking the party, which luckily everybody survives. After that, it's just like before. Set up buffs and debuffs and then go to work. Like Geary before, Mother Harlot has access to the Kunda, which sucks, but isn't anything dangerous. Even more so considering that most of our debuffs are done with Demi-Fiend, who can't really do anything else in this battle to begin with. A triple Bolt Storm almost wiped White Rider, but he barely hung on, and a few turns later, the battle is already over again. Nothing much to mention here. With that, we only got one more Fiend left to battle, so I'd say we're on a good way. And since we're already doing optional stuff, we return to Kabukicho Prison to fight Black Frost for another Magatama. This battle is rather simple if you make sure that your entire party nulls Dark, as he can insta-wipe you with Mamudon. What I forgot though is that Mabufu Dain can freeze characters, which mean they will always get crit with a physical follow-up hit, and this almost killed both White Rider and Daisucho, but both managed to barely hold on. Once all buffs and debuffs are set up though, this fight is easy and we take it out a few turns later and get the Satan Magatama as reward. With that, we continue on with the game's main story and return into the Amala network. And here my OBS crashed and the footage wasn't being recorded. Unfortunately, I didn't notice until like 40 minutes later when I already saved over the previous save slot, so the entire Amala network segment, including the third fight against the Spectres, is gone. Luckily the fight is rather easy, so you really didn't miss much. Just fully buff and debuff, and then make sure to take them out individually so they're not going to use last resort on you. We also got to the Amala temple in the meantime, where we were able to recruit a Suparna, and this is where I noticed the OBS crash, so from here on out, we got footage again. Thanks to this, I also started checking OBS like every 15 to 20 minutes to make sure it's still recording everything. Anyways, before entering the temples, we're heading back into the labyrinth of Amala to complete the third Kalpa, including the Raido chase session. And here is where another rather stupid thing happened. During the chase, the game seemingly soft-locked. Music and all was still playing, but Raido froze in position and I wasn't able to move anymore either. Thinking this was a bug, I looked it up online and had several people report similar behavior, so I just assumed this is a bug that they didn't bother fixing 3 years into the game's HD release. Because of that, I reset and had to do the entire thing again, only for it to freeze again. It was only at that point that I noticed that this in fact was not a bug, but me seemingly accidentally pressing the left joystick, which hides the HUD and freezes everything. So this wasn't even a bug, this is just me being stupid AF. And the fourth time, we actually successfully completed the chase and are now going into a second battle against Raido. Raido starts the battle by critting White Rider, but then luckily targeted the other party members so everybody stayed alive. Bosses attacking before I get the chance to set up buffs and debuffs is probably the most dangerous thing at this point. Anyways, Raido can use Raptor Guardian, which comes with a Dekunda effect, so while debuffing is not that effective, it still removes one press turn every time he has to negate them. Other than that, it's the same as previous encounters. Set up everything and then go to work. Luckily Raido is neutral to physical attacks, so we can use our full arsenal of skills again. The incoming damage is rather manageable with buffs up. Even his later phase attacks don't really do much, and eventually we win the battle and complete the third Kalpa as well. With that, we return to the main story and are heading into the first of 3 temples. We start off with the White Temple, and since this is a new area, we're also allowed to recruit another demon, which is a Titan. I would have preferred Gong Magog, but we gotta take what we can get, I guess. The temple itself is not that special, and once we made it through the gimmicked ways, we're heading to the top to fight the first boss, Albion. Now the gimmick of this fight is to take them out by using their elemental weaknesses, but luckily all of them are neutral to physical damage. Because of that, we go by our usual way of buffing and debuffing, and then proceed to throw out the Focus Tempest, which already does huge damage. After taking out the adds with our other demons, a second Tempest is already enough to take out everybody that is still left and win the battle. As a reward, we get the Adama Magatama and we head into the Black Temple next. The first encounter in here is an Osei, which we are once again successful in recruiting. Again, I would have preferred other options like Loki for example, but we'll take what we can get. Once we reach the top, we get into the next boss fight against LCL, and this was a fight I was very scared of for a certain reason. As always, we start the battle off by buffing and debuffing and then go to work. Every time he starts using mana drain, he will use that very special attack on the next turn, which puts all party members to 1 HP, and then follow it up with a physical attack. Ideally, he attacks either Shikiuchi, who nulls physical, or Demi-Fiend, who has Endure on and could take such a hit at least once. The first time he did attack Demi-Fiend, who even managed to dodge, so that was already a big relief. After doing mana drain the next turn once again, I was already starting to sweat. Unfortunately, we couldn't get him down yet, so we had to fear another wipe, but luckily this time he went after Shikiuchi, so once again we got lucky here. The following turn is enough to take him out, and we win the battle and complete battle number 2. Not going to lie, we got really lucky here. There was a good chance we could have lost the demon. If you wanna play this safe, you can just cast Tetrakarn after he uses mana drain, but since that is not allowed here, we had to hope for some good luck. Our level cap once again gets raised to level 75 now, and we head into the last temple, which is the Red Temple. The first fight in here is a set of 2 Dakinis, and since we're on a roll, we once again managed to successfully recruit it. Our stock is slowly filling up. We only got a single space left, so it might be time for a few fusions soon again. Anyways, we make our way up to the temple until we reach the top where we run into Skadi. Skadi absorbs physical attacks, so again we need to rely on our magic helpers to get us through here. This gives Demi-Fiend a lot of chances to debuff the enemy, so the incoming damage is not a big deal for the most part. Earthquake hits surprisingly hard even with full debuffs up, but since it can't crit, there isn't much to worry about. Judging by the wiki, Skadi can also use both the Kaja and the Kunda, though I've never seen the boss use any of those. Other than that, there is nothing too special about this battle either. Once we're all set up, we start throwing out the damage, and it's only a couple of turns before the enemy is down, and the last battle is won. Our level cap stays the same for now, since the highest level in the upcoming boss fight is only level 73, but considering we're pretty far away from that as well, no need to worry about any caps. We meet up with Isamu and Hichiri, he gets sacrificed, and we continue on in Mifune Shiro, where the mannequins are getting slaughtered left and right. Unfortunately, our first encounter in here is a set of 3 Shikiuchi, which we already got, so no new demons this time around. We side with Futomimi because those poor mannequins, and have to fight the 3 angels Raphael, Gabriel and Uriel now, and this fight is laughable. Put up buffs and debuffs and they pretty much can't do anything anymore. The most annoying part is Raphael, who usually either casts Tetrakarn or Makarakarn, but even that is no problem as all 3 of them have rather low HP, and we can easily take them out and win the battle after just a couple of turns. Our level cap once again gets raised to level 82, and Chiaki transforms into Baal Avatar. Before heading into the next dungeon, we fuse another fiend. This time around it's Red Rider, who not only got great elemental coverage that we're going to need soon, he also has great affinities as he also nulls electricity and force, additionally to the usual light-dark element immunities that the fiends have. With that out of the way, we head into Yurakucha Tunnel, and since we have beaten all fiends up to this point, it is now time to find the last one, Trumpeter. As most of you know, Trumpeter has a very special gimmick. It will use Holy Melody on turn 1 to fully heal a party member, and Evil Melody on turn 4, which kills the party member with the lowest percentage HP. Again, we start setting up buffs and debuffs, and then go to work. Since I am pretty sure that we're not going to beat Trumpeter in 4 turns, we're going to have to sacrifice a demon here, but I actually had a very special idea in mind for this. If the party is mostly healed up and Demi-Fiend uses Divine Shot on the turn before Evil Melody, he's pretty much guaranteed to be the party member with the lowest HP, and considering we have Endure, he's going to survive the insta-kill attack on 1 HP. The boss will continue to do this pattern every 4th turn now, so ideally we win the battle before he gets to use Evil Melody a second time. Luckily, Trumpeter didn't have a lot of HP left anymore, and a few Divine Shots later, the battle is over and we beat the last remaining fiend. I am very much aware that I could have used a low-level demon here as bait for Evil Melody, but this felt kinda cheap, and I like using the enemy's AI pattern and adjust my strategy accordingly. Anyways, after healing up, we return to Yurakucha Tunnel where we can once again grab a new demon. Our first encounter is against 3 Gogmagogs that I would have already liked to get in the Amala Temple. Luckily, this time around everything worked out and we were able to recruit it. And that's pretty much everything to talk about here. Continue on until you reach the diet building. Before starting here, we quickly head back since I forgot to talk to Shige here. Unfortunately, we have to sacrifice a demon for digging since we need the Keybone Stone for the fight against Bisha Mountain later. We went for Flame as a sacrifice since the elements are not really that useful anymore even during fusion, and then returned to the diet building. The first fight here is against 2 Ifrit, which we once again recruit successfully. Since there are a couple of boss fights in the diet building, we're heading straight into the first one against Surt, and you might wonder why our party is changed up quite a bit here. The reason for that is, with the exception of Tempest, literally every attack from Surt is fire elemental, including his regular attack and counters, so we make sure our entire party nulls fire. Once we got buffs and debuffs up, even Tempest is easily tankable and we start doing damage. Due to not having Daisucho in this setup, we need to heal with Demi-3 by throwing items since we got no healer on this team. Surt can once again use the Kunda, but for the most part it is not a big issue and we can reapply debuffs with Demi-Fiend if needed. Due to our team not being very strong and Demi-Fiend often being on healing duty, the battle takes quite a while, but it's relatively safe and eventually we beat Surt and continue on. The next one coming up is Mada, and looking ahead towards Mod coming up soon, I might have highly underestimated this battle because Mada hits hard. Even with buffs and debuffs up, his attacks can deal huge damage, especially Hades Blast that also likes to crit even with 4 stages of accuracy debuffs up. And if this wasn't the worst part already, he also likes to summon Pazuzus that can heal him up. Not only that, but since this is another enemy that drains physical, we once again need to rely on magic attackers for damage. Mada also has access to the Kunda, so this is yet another issue we're running into here. And I can't believe I'm even saying this. Even though the fight was extremely messy and all over the place, we somehow made it through without losing a single demon. After I saw the first Hades Blast, I was rather certain somebody is going down here, but one way or another, we managed to pull through and continue on. With that, we would also raise our level cap to 89, but this kinda feels too high to be honest. Boss levels in general are all over the place in this game, and looking at the final dungeon, even bosses like Ahriman and Noah are only level 80, so honestly, I think this is going to be our cap going forward. We're still far off that level anyways, so it shouldn't matter too much. With that being said, it is now time for one of the most infamous enemies of the entire franchise, mods. Now, I never played the OG version on the PS2, but a lot of people claim that Mod Wars nerfed in the HD remaster and uses Beast Eye far less aggressively compared to the original game. Let's see if we can make it through the fight without losing any party members yet again. Similar to before, we have to rely on magic damage again, this time electricity only. While Mod is not immune to physical attacks, it only takes 10% damage from them, so they're not really worth using either. This is another reason we've used Red Rider earlier, since he's literally the only party member that can cast electricity attacks. While Mod spams the Kunda, you still want to debuff it, even more so since it likes to increase its magic by also spamming Makaya and then hit with Megidolaon. As long as you keep its magic attacks somewhat under control, Megidolaon does not do that much damage. The problem is that Mod likes to use it multiple times within a single turn, and this can quickly get the party's HP down to critical levels. Another issue is that Mod likes to dodge attacks, and unfortunately we don't have Tsukukasha on any party member, which makes actually hitting with attacks quite a bit harder as well. Generally though, we got this battle under control without anybody ever being in danger of going down, and after several misses, we finally hit the last Bolt Storm to beat yet another boss fight. Unlike the previous battles, the next boss Mitra is pretty much free. Just protect against his insta-kill statuses and go to work. No fancy mechanics or immunities this time around, just buff and debuff, and then proceed to Divine Shot the boss out of its boost. With Mitra down, the only boss remaining in here is Samael, and just like Mitra before, this boss is free if you make sure your party is immune to status elements. While it has access to both the Kasha and the Kunda, it is neutral to all elements, which makes this quite a bit easier already. The boss can also cast Beast Eye and then go for a double Rakukasha, which is annoying, but not that big of an issue either. While the battle does take quite a while due to having constantly buff and debuff, we never were in any danger, and eventually Samael goes down and we complete the diet building as well. Hikawa transforms into Ahriman and we're pretty much ready to head into the final dungeon now. Before we do that though, we still have several things we need to complete first. One of them being the Labyrinth of Amala. In order to get the true demon ending, we need to complete it before entering the Tower of Kagatsuchi, so now would be a good time for that. Before we go battle the bosses there though, we make a few detours. We return back to Shibuya to witness the not so successful summon of Big Boy Mara, and then have to battle it. After Mara opens up with Hades Blast, the entire gimmick is to beat it within a single turn, since it will use the Arahan to heal itself to full otherwise. Luckily there are no Dekasha or Dekundak shenanigans in this battle, so we can just set everything up and then pretty much one-shot Mara with Divine Shot. After the battle, we obtain the Muspel Magatama and then continue on to Yurakucho Tunnel to grab the Keymon Stone to trigger the first Bisha Mountain fight. The first version of this battle is rather simple as well. Buff and debuff, Divine Shot, and eventually win the battle. Really not that much to mention here for the most part for now. We obtain the Gundari Magatama, and that's all for outside the Amala Labyrinth. We fuse our Hellbiker with Osei to get a Baiduke Xingshun. I'm thinking about grabbing the Giri Mekala from the last Kalpa and fuse it with Baiduke Xingshun into Mother Harlot, but I'm not quite sure if this would be necessary. I guess it would be a nice backup as healer and another source of pierce if necessary, but we'll see if we actually need to make use of that. With that, we make our way through the 4th Kalpa, and before heading into the next boss fight, we equip a Magatama with Dark Resistance. And honestly, the upcoming boss fight against Beelzebub might be one of those that I'm most afraid of for a reason I will get into shortly. This fight has several phases, with phase 1 being rather tame, while he mostly uses multi-elemental attacks. Beelzebub resists everything but fire. With buffs and debuffs up though, physical attacks still do decent damage as well, even more so when they're critting. His elemental attacks early on barely scratch the party, so once we're all set up, we're starting to do damage with Divine Shot and Prominence. The most dangerous part comes when we transition into phase 2 of the fight. Beelzebub will use the Kasha and focus on turn 1, and then the Kunda and a single target hit on turn 2. With only one Rakukasha user, we basically have to eat a focused attack with only 2 stages of defensive buffs and no attack debuffs at all, and to be honest, I am not sure if any of my party with the exception of Demifiend is tanky enough to take that. And just like I expected, the boss one-shots Red Rider from full HP, and looking at the damage, yeah, Demifiend is pretty much the only one who could take that hit. We bring in the Baiduke Xingshun we just fused before, and continue on. Luckily this attack pattern is only scripted to happen when it transitions from the first phase. While Beelzebub can still randomly go for it, it mostly seems to prefer multi-target attacks like Death Flies or Megidolaon, so we should be safe for the most part now. Death Flies would insta-wipe every party member without death immunity, which luckily Baiduke Xingshun also has. Since the fiends all come with auto immunity, I never even think about such things until we actually have to bring in another demon. Beelzebub still likes to use Dekasha and Dekunda regularly, so we're constantly buffing and debuffing while also trying to get damage in with Divine Shot or Prominence. Baiduke Xingshun also has access to Warcry, Torokasha and Rakukasha, which certainly helps out a lot here. The boss went for focus one more time, but this time luckily went for our newest party member again, who is resistant to physical attacks and was easily able to take the hit. Thinking about it now, maybe it would have been smarter to start the battle with that one over Red Rider to begin with, but oh well, too late now. While the battle is still rather messy, the boss didn't go for another focus, and eventually we were able to take it down and complete the 4th Kalpa as well. We did lose Red Rider here, but honestly, this was probably still the best case scenario considering I need Daisuke for heals, and White Rider for his insta-kill ability against random encounters. We are also getting Raidu as party member as soon as we enter the 5th Kalpa, so there is a good chance we would have replaced Red Rider at this point anyways. Once we're out of there, we grab the Star Key and fuse our defeated Red Rider with Suparna to get Nyx. I'm not even sure I'm gonna need her, but she got good coverage and resists all magic attacks, so why not? It is mostly to make space for Raido anyways. With that, we enter the 5th and final Kalpa, Raido joins us and even gives us 100,000 Maka in the process. And for anyone asking, we're going to skip the Mega Pixie in here. I was pretty sure the starting Pixie line ended up with Daisuchu. For those who may remember, Pixie evolved into High Pixie, then got fused into Kappa Tengu after being defeated, which evolved into Karasu Tengu, which got defeated as well, so we used it as ingredient for Daisuchu. That means we would have to sacrifice Daisuchu for the Mega Pixie, and I'm most certainly not going to do that. With that being said, before heading into the final boss fight of the Amala Labyrinth, we make some more space in our stock by fusing Aquans with the Mothman we bought in the Kalpa into Resverkara. We also need a demon with 25 or more agility to open one of the Kalpa doors, so this comes in very convenient. Once we made it through all the way, we head into the final Kalpa boss fight against Metatron. Unfortunately, I forgot to turn on record, so we're starting the battle on turn 2, and as you can see, Demi-Fiend is already on 1 HP. The reason for that is that I forgot to equip a null Light Magatama and Megatron used Mahama on turn 1, which already triggered the Endure. If another Mahamon hits Demi-Fiend, we're going to lose a life here, so this is already a clutch start to the battle. Generally, in phase 1 of the battle, he will mostly use the Kasha and Dekunda to negate buffs and debuffs, and then go for Holy Wrath or Megidolaon. Even though he constantly dispels our buffs and debuffs, we're still trying to put them on regularly just for increased damage, and Metatron wasting turns having to negate them. Like Beelzebub, he also resists everything, but this time around it's ice. Just like in the previous fight though, physical attacks from Demi-Fiend still do somewhat decent damage, even more so since we got no strong ice magic user. When he went for Mahama on the second time, my butt started to clench as I saw the next life slipping away. Luckily it missed Demi-Fiend and he didn't go for another one throughout the remainder of the fight. The reason for that might be the boss transitioning into phase 2 soon after, where he will start using Tarukasha and Makaya to buff himself, as well as debilitate to weaken the party. Luckily Warcry and Raptor Guardian easily take care of that. One thing I noticed here though is that Metatron at this point stops spamming the Kasha and Dekunda, which makes this fight a lot more manageable. The buffs can easily be negated and are much easier to handle than a constant Dekasha and Dekunda spam. Once we transition into his last phase, he will also start using Fire of Sinai, but with buffs and debuffs up, this is not a big issue either. A double Fire of Sinai could be a problem, but he never really seems to go for that, so it's only a matter of time before we get him down and finally complete the Labyrinth of Amala. With that, we also unlock the Pierce ability from our very first Magatama now. With Demi-Fiend and Raido both piercing attacks, we should be good enough for the final boss later on hopefully. With that, we return to the obelisk where we grab the Chakra Elixir and then head into the Tower of Kagasuchi. Our first and final recruitable encounter here is a throne that we can successfully grab, and that is going to be it for new demons in this run. We got a decent stock, which we hopefully won't need. Technically, we could also grab a couple of demons that you can buy in the Kalpas, but hopefully there will be no need for it. The first boss in the final dungeon is Ahriman. As most of you know, Ahriman has a special gimmick in that he tells you what kind of skills are not allowed to use, and if you disobey him, you will get insta-wiped. As far as I know, he always starts off with physical attacks being forbidden, but this is not an issue since we will use the TAM to set up buffs and debuffs. In his first form, he has access to neither Dekasha nor Dekunda, so the incoming damage is barely a scratch. Once we're done, we throw out a few magic attacks until he switches into healing forbidden mode and then start doing big damage with physical attacks. Literally a turn later, we transition into phase 2. He now gains access to both Dekasha and Dekunda, but he barely ever seems to use those. Since both buffs and debuffs from phase 1 carry over, we can start doing big damage quickly and yeah, literally 3 turns later the battle is already done again. This was a rather easy start. The only issue is that we're starting to get close to our level cap, but luckily after the next boss we get another raise by 5 levels. Speaking of which, Noah is a huge pain. His gimmick is that he can only be hit with one element that he changes every time he uses Aurora. We have nobody with access to decent ice magic, and since Red Rider went down earlier, we also have no proper means of dealing electricity damage. We can hit fire with White Rider and force with Daisucho and Raidu, so those are the turns where we put in the most damage. During other turns we use Raido's Jiraiya dance since Almighty can still damage the boss, though the damage is highly reduced. Luckily his first form again has no Dekasha or Dekunda access, so the incoming damage is neglectable. Once we cast our way through the first phase, he switches into his second form. Unfortunately the gimmick stays the same, and he also gets access to both Dekasha and Dekunda now. I am not sure he ever used those though, as he usually uses Aurora to switch affinities on turn 1, and then goes for either an elemental AoE attack or his new attack Domination, which also barely does any damage, on turn 2. Generally this battle is not dangerous, but due to our lack of elemental coverage takes forever. After wailing on the boss for almost half an hour, we finally get him down and can continue on. Our level cap now also gets increased to level 85, which is good considering we level up to 81 right after the battle. With that, we have now also gained access to the final junk shop where we can buy the Kailash Magatama. Since we got a complete collection now, we get the Lord Sword from the Cathedral of Shadows, so before advancing in the final dungeon, we make a slight detour to get the final Magatama. Behind the obelisk, we find the Bandu Shrine. In order to get access to Masakado, we have to go through the 4 Heavenly Kings first, starting with Sehuten. With the Drain Electricity Magatama equipped, this fight is pretty much free. We start up by buffing and debuffing as always, and then dish out damage. The boss usually starts the battle with Makaya and then either uses Mazionga or Boltstorm, which get absorbed by Demifiend, therefore immediately ending his turn. And that's pretty much it for battle number 1. Keep doing damage until he's down, and then continue on with battle number 2. This one is a bit trickier, so we're changing up our party a little. Remember how Black Frost froze characters and then almost wiped them early on? Same deal here with boss number 2 Jikakuten. He will always use ice attacks until he freezes somebody, and then follow it up with critical physical attacks. If the entire party knows ice though, there is literally nothing he can do. We start the battle by debuffing the enemy, and once we're done, we dismiss Daisucho since he's the only one not nulling ice. Once that is done, we can put the battle on auto since there is literally no way the enemy can damage the party anymore, and we just wail on him until he's down as well. Battle number 3 against Komokuten is a little trickier, so we're doing some more preparations for that. We fuse our Baidu Xingshun with Dakini to get a Kali, and use our own Komokuten to boost the level a bit more. The reason for that is we want at least 2 Rakukashi users in our party. While Komokuten specializes in force magic, which we can drain with Demifiend, his much more dangerous gimmick is the combination of focus and physical attacks. Not only that, but he also starts his turns with Rakukasha and Rakunda, meaning that if we want to max our defense, we'd like to have at least 2 Rakukasha users to keep up with the debuffs. Luckily he has neither Dekasha nor Dekunda, so once all buffs and debuffs are up, we should be safe for the most part. The focused physical attack does about 290 damage, so unless he gets a crit off or he attacks the same party member 3 times in a row, we should be fine here. Unfortunately, he will also use Deathbound after focus occasionally, so we need to hope for our party members to either dodge or not get hit multiple times by it. And yeah, that is pretty much all. Continue pummeling on the boss until he's down as well, and only one more is left. Before we fight Bishamountain though, we return to the Tower of Kagatsuchi since I wanted to raise my max level before heading into the last king fight. After already beating the first 2 bigger bosses in here, we run into Thor next. And this one really isn't worth mentioning. Thor is a complete pushover. Buff and debuff, and we're able to beat him literally within a single turn of attacking. With that, the path is free for the last big boss in the dungeon before the actual final bosses. And even though we played really well up until this point and sometimes also got pretty lucky, eventually this happened. We ran into an encounter with 3 mods and 3 foul shadows who immediately went on to attack the party, and the amount of attacks was too overwhelming and we lose our second life here. With that, we got a single life left. I would have loved to have a safety net for the final boss, but I guess we just have to do everything first try now, or else the run is dead. Luckily, the second time around, we made it all the way and can head into the next boss fight now. We ingest the Jet Magatama for Null Curse and get going against Baal Avatar now. Phase 1 is rather easy. Baal's Bane is literally a free attack since everybody nulls Curse, and with full buffs and debuffs up, she barely does any damage, so we can start pumping out good numbers. The only dangerous thing she can do is occasionally use Mahamon, considering Demi-Fiend is not protected against light. With 4 stages of accuracy debuffs up though, the chance of her even hitting one of them and potentially triggering the Endure is rather low. Once she hits phase 2, she will use Divine Will and summon an Osei and the Flores to the field. Osei is the one you want to get rid of first, since he can heal to full using the Arahan. Flores can technically use the Kunda, but due to Baal usually wasting press turns, he never really gets a chance to even use it. After Osei is gone, we focus on Flores, and just a few turns later he is gone as well, and Baal is by herself again. At this point, the battle is pretty much won already. Baal by herself can't really do all too much. She starts using Bisai now for some extra press turns, but usually just wastes them with her attacks. A few turns later, she goes down as well, and we're technically on our way to the final boss now. With that, we also raise our level cap for the final time in this round to level 99. You can go past level 99 in this game, but this is going to be our hard cap for the final boss. That being said, we still have to complete the last battle in Bando Shrine, and once we leveled up a little, we're heading there next. Bijou Mountain can hit pretty hard, which is why I wanted to get a couple of levels onto the party before approaching him. He starts off the battle by casting Debilitate twice onto the party, and this is something I was really glad of. Previous bosses oftentimes started the battle with unmitigated attacks which almost wiped us on several occasions, so having debuffs that we can easily dispel with Raido is something I would much rather have. Again, we put up buffs and debuffs and then go to work. Unfortunately, Bijou Mountain has access to the Kasha, so occasionally we have to set up our buffs again, but other than that, there isn't that much to pay attention here. His main gimmick is that he likes to cast Dragon Eye, then buff himself 4 times using either Tarokasha or Makaya, and then attack with Tempest or make it alone. The magic attacks are no problem, but Tempest could become dangerous if he gets a crit in and gets another press turn during that. Luckily, with 4 stages of accuracy debuffs up, this is not that likely to happen, and White Rider can just Akasha the boss on the following turn again. And that is pretty much all. Continue on like this, and a few turns later the boss is down, and we obtain the final Magatama from Masakado. With that out of the way, the only thing left to do are the 2 final bosses. Considering we only have a single life left though, and Chronicles Lucifer is a huge pain in the butt, we want to make sure to do some level grinding before approaching him. We get Demi-Fiend all the way to level 98, which is mostly to show you that I'm not overgrinding here, and then head into the final battles. First up is Kagasuchi, and with the extra grind we did, this one becomes really easy. In phase 1, Kagasuchi has no access to either the Kasha or the Kunda, so once we're fully buffed and debuffed, the battle is pretty much free. Vast Light is the only thing that hits a little harder, and even that one only does like 200 damage at a point where the party has over 700 max HP. We on the other hand hit for almost 8000 on Demi-Fiend, and that is without a crit. Even phase 2 doesn't really make any difference. It technically gains access to the Kunda, but it's not really using it either. The new special attack Infinite Light does hit much harder, but with about 400 damage, it's still not super dangerous. It's just a few turns and the boss is down. Since we're heading towards true demon ending though, there is still one more fight to do, which is probably the hardest one in the entire game by far. It is now time to head into the final battle with Lucifer. Phase 1 of the final battle is still relatively safe. Most of Lucifer's hard-hitting attacks are still locked, and without access to the Kasha and the Kunda, we can safely put up our buffs and debuffs before going to work. Considering both Demi-Fiend and Raido have access to Pierce, they're going to be our DPS, with Daisucho and White Rider serving as healers and buff and debuff options. In the event of somebody going down, we still have Kali from early on standby, who has access to pretty much all important debuffs. Once we transition into phase 2, Lucifer gets access to High King, as well as both Dekasha and Dekunda, and he usually likes to spam those. Luckily for us, he went for High King first and a single target attack later, so we're able to get another turn of fully buffed attacks in. And amazingly enough, he does the very same thing on his following turn. Now I'm not quite sure what the chances are for that, but I usually remember Lucifer immediately spamming Dekasha and Dekunda once he gets access to them. In fact, we're doing so much damage that on the next turn he already uses the Araha, effectively getting him back into phase 1. I mentioned this earlier in the run, but one of the differences between the Maniacs and the Chronicles version is that in this one, Lucifer will use the Arahan to fully heal himself once. After 2 more turns of full damage, we once again enter phase 2, and there is the Dekunda we just talked about. Okay, so Lucy isn't broken, we just got lucky it seems. This is the point where the fight can become pretty messy. Dekasha and Dekunda suck big time to say the least. We can put up a full attack debuff thanks to Warcry, but with only one Rakokasha user, we usually only get 1 or 2 stages of defense buffs up the turn after. I also decided to only throw up 1 Fog Breath now instead of 2, since I am pretty sure High King is not dodgeable, so this is mostly to hopefully get someone to dodge and make it allow. Once we enter the last phase though, the real fun starts. Lucifer now gets access to Root of Evil, and this is the second and even more important version difference. In the Chronicles version, Root of Evil comes with a Dekasha attached, so not only can it potentially reduce the party's HP by 90%, it also negates all the party's buffs. And if you remember, we only have 1 Rakokasha use in our setup, so this is definitely the most dangerous thing to happen. My biggest fear here is him reducing the party's HP with Root of Evil, and then follow it up with a single target attack where he loves to crit party members, which has a pretty big chance to wipe anybody that gets targeted. White Rider is basically on sole Rakokasha duty at this point, while Daisucho heals every turn, and Demi-Fiend mostly puts up debuffs with an occasional Freikugel in between. Depending on Lucifer's pattern, we have several turns where we literally don't get a single hit of damage in, considering we have to heal and put up buffs and debuffs again. There were a couple of close calls throughout the fight, but eventually we throw out 1 last Freikugel, beat Lucifer, and complete the run with only a single life left. And that is it, everybody. We actually did it. After losing the second life so close before the final battle, I was really afraid of what might happen, especially since Chronicles Lucifer can be a huge pain, but luckily everything went according to plan and we managed to pull through. This is definitely the hardest Nuzlocke I've attempted so far, but it was huge fun, and now that we got pretty much a set rule set, there might be more of those coming in the future. As always, special shoutouts go out to this video's supporter Neverell. Becoming a YouTube channel member or joining the Patreon gives you 48-hour early access to new challenge runs, among some other things, but enough of the plugs for now. That is it for me this time. I hope you enjoyed the run, and a big thanks to all of you for the continued support of the channel. Seeing so many people enjoying my content and encouraging me makes this even more fun, so shoutouts to all of you, thanks for watching, and I hope to see all of you next time again. Until then, take care.